Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the beginning of the last days, or as I like to call it, the Truman Show. Do you feel like you're living in the Truman Show? It seems like there's a whole lot of actors. Biden, shaking hands in midair as his wife says, yes, of course, he's going to run again to be the president. And everybody, even like the politically incorrect Bill Maher, he's saying, oh, yes, I'd absolutely vote for Biden if he wrote again. Really? What kind of person in their ever-loving, broken mind would actually, do we have a problem with the camera or you're just fixing? Okay. Would actually think that this was a good idea to have Biden run again? I mean, is it a good idea that we ever have Trudeau run again? No, of course it's not. We've got a lot to cover. The world is going mad. Let me tell you, there are protests worldwide, and a lot of it for the same thing we're seeing here. So I like to start the show. As you know, my dad passed away about a year and a half ago. What an incredible man he was. He taught me what was important. And pretty much everything you see on CBC, CTV, and Global is not important or true. But he took this word and he underlined it from stem to stern. And I like to read what he thought was important. And then later on in the show, I like to underline and read you a final scripture. I like to underline what I think is important, so one day my kids are going to look. You know, kids kind of think their parents are not cool at all till they get old. And then I thought my parents were the coolest thing that ever lived, but I didn't think they were that cool. Did I drop something? I'm good, right? Yeah. All right. So I opened up to Matthew 5 today. And this is where Jesus was giving the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most famous sermons that he ever did. And just a couple verses my dad underlined. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. What I really caught from that was that I don't think we're in a nation that hungers and thirsts after righteousness. It seems like there's a thirst and a quest for power and money, and that is what is now guiding a lot of what is going on. And when we see the truth coming out in science, when we see doctors and pilots and firemen standing up for the truth on one side, while the rest of the world seems to be parroting some sort of perspective that doesn't make sense, you have to wonder what's really going on. A couple things before we go forward today. African nations have recently been meeting in Moscow with Putin. So despite the Russian-Ukrainian war, what's that? I don't know. Where are they? I'm not even certain if they're in Russia or Africa. Is Putin driving around on his jets? I don't know. I would be scared if I was Putin to be riding around. But he just had this huge meeting with all of these African leaders. Do you have a picture of those African guys? Those dudes? I sent like a, oh yeah, let's do the video then. Take a look. So Putin says a few things, right? Let me emphasize that our country has always paid and will continue to pay priority attention to cooperation with African states. It would not be an exaggeration to say that this is one of the invariable priorities of Russian foreign policy. Since the time of the heroic struggle of the peoples of Africa for their independence, it is well known how significant support the Soviet Union once rendered to the peoples of Africa in the struggle against colonialism, racism, and apartheid, how it helped many African states to gain and protect their sovereignty. It consistently supported the formation of statehood, the strengthening of defense capability, the creation of the foundations of the national economy, and the training of personnel. The construction by Soviet specialists of Africa's largest Aswan hydroelectric power station was once a symbol of such things. The Russian Federation today continues to follow the line of support and assistance to the continent. I would like to note that African states are constantly increasing their weight and role in the world affairs and are asserting themselves more and more confidently in politics and the economy. Does it go on much longer? I think it's kind of like you can just leave it playing, but basically, it's very interesting. So here's Putin and Xi Jinping. I love saying that name because I can somehow say it right. I don't know why, but President Xi Jinping. I like that. So here's Putin meeting with all of these people. Africa's going on, and the world is beginning to separate. And what are we finding? So we've got the United States, Canada, and Ukraine pretty much being pitted against the world right now. And we're closer to a bomb going off than we've ever been in my lifetime. And warmongers think this is cool. You bet we got to fight. Whatever it takes, we got to fight. Well, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Peacemakers. I don't want to see a war, do you? Why are we fighting for the war? Why is Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, Biden all fighting and wanting war? And they're going to keep on assisting this war to just keep going and going. Peace talks won't have anything to do with it. Not Zelensky. President Zelensky in the Ukraine is busy putting pastors in jail right now. Fantastic. All right, so in Paris, before we get to our guests, we're going to move on very fast, but this is what's going on, guys. So they are telling us in the news that the people in Paris are upset because the government does not want them to start getting their senior citizens pension until, is it 65 instead of 62? And they're trying to tell us in the news that this is all over pension. All of this. We don't wanna retire, 3 years later. We're gonna burn cars and we're gonna get beaten up in the streets. Really? That's not what this is about. This is about the same thing that the Netherlands, that Holland, that the United States, and that Canada has recently had a big problem with, and that's our freedom. This is about freedom. The people of Paris have actually gotten to the place where many are laying down their lives for freedom. And it ain't about the pension. So if somebody is writing that, reporting that in your local news, that's not it. It's not what this is about. The entire world is inflamed right now because our sovereign bodies are under attack from people who think they can tell us how to live, what to think, all the ideologies, what to do, what to take, the forced mandates, all of it. So it is my privilege today to have on a couple of amazing guys from Canada, and they're actually from Alberta. These are men who have stood up, and we had them on last year sometime. And this is Michael Andrusco and Stephen Dabbagh. And we seem to have lost Michael's feed, so hopefully he'll come back on. We'll start with Stephen then. Oh, he's there now. Okay. And so these are a couple of firemen. We all know what's happened. Welcome, gentlemen. We all know what's happened in Canada. A lot of people lost their jobs this last couple of years because they stood up and believed that their body was their sovereign right and that they had a choice of what to put in their body. And so welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for greeting us here today. I wonder if you could start, maybe we'll go with you, Stephen, if you can start by telling us sort of the history of this, what happened in your province, and what brought you to this place today.
Yeah, sure, Laura. Thanks again for having us on. Yeah, where do we start? Back in September of 2021, there was an announcement that there would be a vaccination mandate where all city of Calgary workers were going to have to provide proof of vaccination by a certain timeline. I believe it originally was like October the 15th. I think it got moved to November 1st and then again November 15th, or face discipline, possibly even losing their jobs. I think originally the big threat was to put people on unpaid leave of absence, which isn't a real thing. We all looked into it. An unpaid leave of absence is meant for workers to request it from their employer voluntarily. You can't be put on a forced unpaid leave of absence. What happens there is you're constructively dismissed when they do that. And that's what happened to a number of our group. We were put on unpaid leave of absence. And for myself, I was off with injury. It was a fire-related injury. And at the same time, we had a municipal election going on. And I came up with this brilliant idea to run for city council in 4 weeks, and had our group help me do it. And I think it kind of allowed pushback to the city council and whoever the special interest groups that are behind them, that people aren't just going to take this lying down. When I got back to work, obviously I didn't win. I ran against an incumbent, but I got, I think, 2,500 votes in 3 weeks, which I thought was pretty good, pretty decent. I was hoping to win, but at the same time, the way city council works is you need a majority to make anything work. And there was strange happenings going on with our voter cards, scanner cards for the election. Much of what was going on with the Biden-Trump election. And right now in the city of Calgary, there's a movement to recall the election because people have been aware of it. There's also a provincial election going on. So people are getting active, and whether or not we'll be able to do it, we'll see. It seems like it's a pretty monumental task. You need like 40% of eligible voters to sign for that to happen. We'll see. People are trying.
Wow, that's fascinating and very interesting what you're saying. I think that a lot of people in a lot of places in the world have had quite a few. Carrie Lake down in the United States is in the battle for her life, even right now, over just her local state election. And so, did you? Yeah, you didn't quite finish. I think I interrupted. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So what ended up happening is, for myself, after the election was over, I was still dealing with an injury back on WCB. So the date came for me to return to work in December I think it was the 7th, and me and my wife had made the decision that the guys that were refusing to get vaccinated were putting on 30 days and then 60 days and then 90 days leave of absences. So these leave of absences were, for all purposes, indefinite from anybody's interpretation. And so what we decided to do was resign under duress. So there was a number of us that resigned under duress because of the obvious constructive dismissal that, this was the advice of, not the advice, but of exactly what an unpaid leave of absence, a forced unpaid leave of absence is by lawyers, by the City of Calgary Human Resources Department, and as well as our union couldn't give us the proper answers to. We've never heard of a forced unpaid leave of absence. It was a way of punishing us to comply, and there's a certain group of us that weren't going to do that. So a bunch of us resigned under duress. Some took the option to test, even though that's also illegal, and assault according to Criminal Code of Canada, SO2. Yeah, so where we ended up is finding um, litigation, legal advice through Grey Woke Spencer, Leighton Gray, and he's served the city of Calgary with a statement of claim back in June of 2022.
That's fantastic. And Michael, you had joined Stephen in this quest.
Yeah, you know what? When everything happened, just like Steve was saying, at first you kind of feel like you're all alone. You don't really know, who else is out there that's thinking the same way you are. But once you start to put some feelers out, and then you find out there are guys that think the same way you do, and yeah, it was definitely. Uh, it's nice to get into a group where everybody's thinking the same way, and you know that you're not the only one out there thinking this way, and it definitely makes it a lot easier when there's more than when you're by yourself. for sure.
Well, I just want to let you guys know that millions of Canadians are actually with you. Millions of people do truly understand that what has happened to us, many losing their jobs. Here in British Columbia, the doctors, the nurses still not allowed back to work. Many people understand that this has been a grave injustice. And it doesn't seem to matter that the truth is all coming out about, the vaccines were virtually ineffective. I don't even get banned on Facebook or YouTube anymore for saying that because they didn't stop transmission and they didn't prevent the spread. They didn't stop you from getting COVID. And in some cases, many people have experienced tremendous harms. And we're seeing a lot of things happen globally that have been the outfall of these vaccines. And yet we see that our legislators seem to be a bit in the dark about all of that.
And so the interesting perspective for us as firefighters in Calgary is that we're also first medical responders. So we go to the same calls as Alberta Health Services paramedics. Many of us are EMTs and paramedics on the fire trucks as well. And with, I would say, the absolute meltdown of the Alberta government during the Kenney administration, we would arrive first on scene at calls and be there for half an hour to 45 minutes before you get a paramedic there. Also, being first on scene during, prior to the COVID lockdowns, during the lockdowns, and then seeing what happened with the vaccine rollout. We had bird's eye view of everything that exactly these medications were doing. And I was a captain downtown during the lockdowns at stations 1 and 2, which are some of the busiest stations in the country. And so we go to multiple medical calls there, like literally thousands a year. And seeing how not many people were getting sick or dying of COVID-19. It seemed like there's a lot of scare and fear going on early on in March and April of 2021. And then, we're all looking at each other. Okay, we're wearing these blue suits, these ridiculous biohazard suits that aren't even inflated and donned properly. I believe it was mostly to scare the public and to go along with the fear mongering. They had a social distancing in fire halls and wearing masks in fire trucks. It was absolutely ridiculous. Like people who were some of the smartest people I knew just checked their brains at the door and went along with it. Going on, come May and June, we're not seeing anybody getting sick of dying of this. It only seems the people that are dying mysteriously are the people that are going to the hospitals or going to the nursing homes. And lo and behold, they're all taking a bad PCR test, which is like, I can't remember the exact stats. I want to say it was like 50% false negatives and like 40% false positives. So it's an absolutely ridiculous bad test. And then they're being told by AHS, Alberta Health Services, doctors and nurses, that they got to go on a ventilator and be treated with remdesivir, which I guess 2/3 of them got seriously injured or died from that treatment. And nobody, where's the investigation on that is what I want to know. And then we got the bird's eye view of what happened in the rollout in, it was kind of about, I think it was December, January, where Alberta Health Services were starting to get the shots along with the elderly, the so-called people at risk of 2022. And then February, March come around when more people are taking the vaccinations as the Trudeau government doesn't have enough. But by, I would say April, May, June, it seemed like I was going to a suspicious call every shift of where somebody was dealing with the swelling issue or somebody in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s dealing with heart and stroke issues. And these aren't, I've never seen anything like that in my career. And I don't understand people who say that was normal. I documented in my reports and made sure that in my officer incident report for my crew to be asking whether or not has this individual recently received a COVID-19 vaccination. And almost all, like 100% of the time at these weird calls, it was yes. So here we are. I knew something was wrong and I wasn't going to go along with it. Our job was to protect the public, not to be fear mongers or coerced to go along with something that we know is safe or effective that's dangerous for them, right? So
What's so amazing about what you're saying is that you're right. You're first responders and you have the bird's eye view of what is truly happening. And I bet they don't want you saying what you're saying right now.
Yeah, and I actually put a letter into the COVID-19 investigation panel headed up by Preston Manning. It was actually
Ugh.
through our legal contact, Leighton Gray. And so hopefully they take my testimony, and it's all well documented, into consideration, because I'd be happy to be a witness or help
Right.
them out in
And
their investigation anyway.
amazing. Thank you. Thank you for your courage right now. Do you know how many firemen, how many doctors, nurses, people that should be screaming from the hilltops are not saying a word because they're too afraid, and you guys are. Michael, did you have any experiences like that where you
Yeah.
saw the harms?
Yeah, you know what? I did. I think the most frustrating part for me was when the mandates actually took effect in for us. They knew already, like Steve was saying, they knew already that the or that you mentioned too, that the vaccine didn't work, that it didn't stop the spread, that it didn't stop you from getting it. They knew already by then that the PCR test was garbage. So that was, to me, that was the most frustrating part coming up to the deadline for the mandate. It's like, why are we still pushing this when we know that it does not work? And you know what? And a lot of the calls I'd go on, to me, it was a lot of what I noticed a lot was misinformation. Like, we would show up to a call, and at that point, when we would go in with the paramedics, they would insist that everybody would have a mask on. And you'd show up to a call, and the people that you're showing up to, they'd be like, well, I don't need to wear a mask. I got my shot. And they're like, no, you still need to wear your mask. I mean, but they thinking because they took the shot that it was like the silver bullet, they were invincible. And it just wasn't the case.
Hmm. So very, very interesting. And so I'm understanding now that you're moving forward and you're still in the courts. Is this the case? The province of Alberta is threatening you to drop the case, advising you that you're going to lose and you're going to be responsible for their provincial court costs. Is that happening?
Yeah, with what happened there, we did end up dropping it against the province, but we are still going after the city. Unfortunately, what we've come to see with our process with the courts is that it's extremely expensive. Be great
Yes.
if there was lawyers that could do this for free, but it's just so many people out there, so much work for them. I don't see how it's possible or feasible. And the lawyers that are standing up and are also taking a shellacking from the same groups that we're fighting, right? So I get that part. However, yeah, for us to take this to the Supreme Court with a few of the rulings that have happened, I mean, we will need definite support, because so far we've been doing it on our own dime. And since, like, about the last year and a bit, I don't know where we're at, 14 months here, we've kind of racked up a legal charge of over 150 grand, pushing 160 grand. And for people that are working part time or lost their main career, it's not easy to do, even with a group of 17.
Absolutely. And so do you guys have a GoFundMe or something that you're using to raise funds?
Yeah, there's a link to our Give Send Go account. That's Give Send Go at Firefighters for Truth. That's the number 4, Firefighters for Truth.com. So
Firefighters
anybody
for
can look.
Truth, the number 4 and
Yeah,
truth.com.
that's right.
Excellent. I just encourage everybody to help the firefighters and to help these guys that are telling the truth. Um, the the shocking part, I think, of everything is the medical authorities' continued press in spite of what we're learning. I'm going to have a pilot on after you, and we've had 4, and I believe today is the 5th major incident of a pilot being incapacitated in the last month. And
Yeah, like, I mean,
this
I
is
guess
unusual.
no, not even to talk about firsthand accounts, but just looking at the statistics right away from the Pfizer dump in the beginning, like over a year ago, right? Where they tried to lock up that information about the trials of this vaccine. and how dangerous it was at the time prior to it even, this was the beginning stages of the rollout, right? That it was extremely dangerous. And then now to have all the thousands of doctors' peer reviews come out showing how harmful and the chances of taking first, second, third, fourth shot. Not to mention looking at our own doctors, how many of them have dropped dead after going for their third and fourth shots. So, what did we all do last year that changed, right? That young people without previous medical history are dropping dead, like pilots, like firefighters, like police officers, like doctors, nurses. It's I don't know. I feel like people are. It seems like I've heard a lot of people talk about it as like a fifth generation war of information, and you can see how locking us down created like almost a society of people that were traumatized by how their government treated them. And people, I feel, aren't over that. They're walking around injured and they're not able to see the truth, most of them. There are a lot of us who can, like I think 20 or 30% of us can't not see the truth and do something about it. But yeah, it'd be great if there was more of us and make the fight easier for sure.
Have Are you saying that you have seen harms and know of harms that are happening to others? And do you think that people are afraid, other firefighters, they don't want to lose their jobs, and they've actually seen what yourself and Michael, I'll ask you. I mean, probably people, they look at you guys and they're like, wow, I don't want to go through all that. I'm just going to shut my mouth, take the vaccine, be quiet. But probably they're experiencing some difficulties here and there.
Well, absolutely. You know, we've talked to, or I've talked to a few firefighters that are still on the job, and they're all seeing it. And I mean, they do say, "Hey, you know, you guys were really courageous or brave to do what you did. I could never do that. I need my job." Well, man, I needed my job too, but it still had to be done. I mean, if we don't, we still gotta stand, and there are sacrifices when you stand, and there's going to be sacrifices, and it ain't easy. But like Steve said, we need more and more people to start doing this, or else it gets to the point where it's pretty tough to continue without support and other people joining in.
It absolutely is difficult to do what you're doing. So we have put your Give Send Go in the chat, and it's hard to put up the whole link thing because it's like you're saying it's kind of got a lot of different letters or whatever. But say it one more time: firefightersfortruth.com.
That's right. Give Send Go link is on our
Yeah,
website. Firefighters for Truth, the number four.
the number four.
Firefighters, right? For
Truth.com. We've
Truth.com.
got that in the
Yeah.
description, and the link to get to helping you is important. Before I let you go, gentlemen, I'll just give you a final word. I just thank you for telling the truth about what you saw. I think it's pivotal. I'm glad that you've given your testimony, Stephen, to Preston Manning. And if there can be, some place where these stories are collected and the truth is being told, maybe that can get to the Canadian people. But I'll tell you what, so last night I was just out, somewhere at a retailer, and I said to them, we got in a conversation. I said, have you heard about all of the vaccine injuries? They have no idea. And they come into contact with a lot of people every month. A lot of people have no idea. And they'll be prepared at any time that the government says, oh, something's happening, to just proceed with this dangerous thing that we've been forced to take. Many have been forced to take, not all of us. So I'll just thank you very much for the courage. But Stephen and Michael, what are your final words?
Well, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I find that not all, but most people in this fight are people of faith of one form or another, and I think that has a lot to do with maybe not relying on yourself to get this done, but relying on God. And I don't usually speak like this, but I think this is where we're at. The last few years have shown me a lot of good and evil and what's going on in the world, and if anything, it's definitely empowered my faith that way, and I would pray for all Canadians to open their eyes and trust in God and stand up and fight.
Wow. I just thank you for saying that, because this has come down to being such a spiritual battle. In the natural, many of us don't know how to fight this whole Truman Show we're in right now, where everyone's going la 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 and not even paying attention to the science, and we are seeing pure evil, and the only way to fight that pure evil is with good, and that's with God. And for you, Michael, final word.
Yeah. You know what? I just echo what Steve said. You know, what made this country great, what made our province great, is all the values and the principles that we all grew up with. We're all biblically based. We just need to get back to that. It seems like it's insurmountable, but that's what we need to get back at. We need to get God back in this country. And I think me and Steve are kind of going at it two different ways. Steve's kind of been working with the UCP and trying to get some good candidates in there and some good people in as MLAs. And I've decided to run as an MLA myself for the Independence Party under Arthur Pawlowski. So I think we're both pushing it. We're doing what we're doing within the courts, but we're also pushing it in other areas too. So,
Well, any party would be blessed to have either of you. You're just absolutely fantastic, and I just thank you for coming on. I just hope you know that there is a collective standing ovation across the country of people probably in tears right now, because I feel very emotional at what you guys have gone through, what you're fighting for, how you've stood when so many have cowered. You are basically like, and I'm sure there's a third person, but you're like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and you're fighting and you're facing the fire and you're in the fire. But truly, like that story shows us, that is the only time where God literally showed up in person and danced in the fire with those that were so daring. And here you are, firemen. I like that. That's amazing. Thank you very much for being here. And I'd like to have an update whenever you'd like to. Please reach out. We'd love to have you on again when there's something to report.
Thanks very much for having us.
We'll be praying. Absolutely incredible to see people stand up and do what's right when it costs them. Think of the cost to these gentlemen. But they've seen too much. They know the truth and they're putting it forward. And hey, everyone, they're getting involved in politics at their provincial level. You know, I would be voting for someone like Michael or Stephen. Whatever party they're in, you want them in. Fantastic. Should we go to our next guest? Is he waiting? Okay, I don't want to keep him waiting any longer because we have got some things going on that we want to talk about. Many of you have heard that we're seeing a very strange and terrible thing in the skies, and that is that pilots are becoming incapacitated. And pilots have been forced into a terrible position this last couple of years. And right now we have got Greg Hill from Free to Fly. He is a director of Free to Fly, and he is here to talk to us. This couldn't be more timely, Greg. Literally, as we were starting this show, a tweet came across our desk regarding yet another incapacitated pilot. And am I the one that needs to show that, JT? In any case, Greg, I'll find that. But welcome to the show. I'm sure there's a lot of concerns going on right now for pilots.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on again. And I saw the same came out from Josh Yoder with US Freedom Flyers, who's part of our global aviation advocacy coalition that we brokered last year. So we keep in touch with these incidents. And there's not a lot of detail coming out about it right now. And this is the challenge with these incapacitations is at the end of the day, they're matters of private medical information. So unless the individual involved wants to get into the details, it's difficult to dial into to the details. pilot incapacitations are something that have occurred for, ever since aviation was a thing, really. So we try to be measured and responsible in speaking to them. We've spoken out from the get-go pre-mandate with our concerns, medically and scientifically grounded, of the elevated risk with those in aviation, given the fact that we sit for long periods, we're flying around in thin air. We've provided that information to some of the largest pilot unions in the country, as well as the airlines, and unfortunately, it's been total silence from them. So we want to approach this in a measured and a balanced way. Like I said, given the fact that these incapacitations do occur, but at the same time continue to monitor them and to really start talking about what we can do.
So, yes, so just to be clear for the people that are watching, Josh Yoder, 2 hours ago, there's already 44,000 views on this tweet. He says, I'm being notified by passengers on a Southwest flight departing Las Vegas that the captain became incapacitated soon after takeoff this morning. He was removed from the flight deck and replaced by a non-Southwest pilot who was commuting, I guess, on that flight. Wow. I mean, isn't that a blessing that happens to be another pilot on the flight? This is now the 5th pilot incapacitation that I'm aware of in the past 2 weeks. I will post more details as they become available. And then just to go, Steve Kirsch weighed in on it and said the FAA has no plans to investigate any of these vaccine injuries. What is it going to take? A plane crash? I know Tucker Carlson, Greg, has been also talking about this and saying that we're getting awfully close to something going very, very wrong. Susan Northrup should be fired now. Get someone who cares about public and pilot safety into the role now before it's too late. FAA is ignoring this, and Pete Buttigieg is asleep at the wheel. Please retweet. So, Greg, from your perspective, do you feel not enough effort, or is someone investigating this? Because I also saw somebody responding saying that actually they are beginning to take measures to test pilots, how their heart is.
Well, because you and I are located in Canada, or at least I think you are, but I
Yes,
try
I
to
am.
keep this I try to keep this local, and there's been a fair bit of talk, at least amongst the like-minded communities, of what we're seeing down in the States. And Tucker Carlson and Steve Kirsch both spoke to this, and that is the changing of the parameters as far as the ECGs or EKGs in the States. But what I like to point out, and I've been trying to draw attention to this, and this goes to what I was saying earlier. Pilot incapacitations occur. Now, these can occur for anything from eating a bad meal in an airplane to having a stroke or a heart attack. I do want to point out, airplanes don't drop out of the sky because of pilot incapacitation. And I think we've got to be careful not to create so much fear that people stop flying for reasons that are not really grounded in the facts as far as what we
Yeah,
know
and
as
I
aviation
actually,
professionals.
I appreciate you saying that, because we don't want to become, so scared that we're like falling into their trap of don't fly, don't go
Right.
and don't have a vacation. I know it is adding a little bit of stress. I have been honest enough to say that as I fly, it's a new thing I think of, and I just say another extra prayer, Greg, and I pray that angels are on the wings, and I'm going to be okay. But I appreciate what you're saying. If there's 2 pilots, generally speaking, everyone should be okay in the event that one pilot has a medical problem, right?
Right. Well, what we talk, pilots are kind of the ultimate safety mitigators. So it's a scenario that we don't want to get ourselves into. Ironically, at my captain upgrade at the company I'm with, that was my scenario in part of my final check ride. Was the first officer keeled over, and I had to get the airplane back on the ground while the airplane was on fire, and all sorts of other things. So it's something that we train for. But, and again, I don't want to cover this over in a way where we're not addressing the risk. So in terms of scenario based, if I'm going from point A to point B and the first officer keels over, it makes my job instantly much more difficult, because now I'm doing everything. I'm communicating, I'm flying, I'm sorting out a diversion, and a diversion in and of itself is something that's very high workload for two pilots. So it increases the risk for sure. But to the point that I was addressing before, this is the quandary that I think we find ourselves in nationally, and that doesn't matter whether it's aviation or otherwise. Is we're all doing a lot of talking and consuming of information, which is important, but at the end of the day, the $1,000,000 question everybody is asking is, what do you want me to do about it, right? And as far as Canada goes, I'm particularly I'll use the word disgusted, and I try to be careful with my words, but I'm particularly disgusted with Transport Canada, because in this country, if you compare us to the States where people are concerned that they've widened the parameters on their EKGs, the situation right now in Canada with our medicals as aviation professionals or as pilots, we're simply not doing in-person medicals. We're allowed to right now go 36 months without an in-person medical, and this was a COVID issue. But Transport Canada has just extended this. I see you've put up the latest with Southwest, and I did see that they did divert somewhere
Yes.
along the way here.
Just
So
letting
our
everyone
thoughts and
know.
prayers are with the
Oh,
pilot involved, and then that's really
absolutely.
the biggest concern any of these times, right? But back to the medical issue. During COVID, we were allowed to simply attest, meaning we could sign a piece of paper and say we're healthy. And then, and just stepping back, for decades and decades, in-person medicals were an absolute requirement annually. And actually, if you were over 40, it used to be every 6 months, and then it went to a year. But during COVID, we went to an ability to go 36 months. And this was the case right up until March of this year. So as the world sort of goes back a little bit to normal, at least in the sense that as a pilot, I could ride on a crowded subway, I could go to a hockey game with 20,000 people, I was allowed to skip going and sitting in a pristine airline office with my Transport Canada doctor because COVID. And in an environment where safety has never been dispensed with simply for convenience or otherwise, Transport Canada unbelievably just extended that until 2025 in this era. And the reason was flexibility. And since when was flexibility in a position of primacy? So I would say to your viewers, if you're watching what's happening in the sky, and you can feel a little bit helpless, right? Because you see what's transpiring, you think, well, what can I do? I would say contact Transport Canada. You can go on our website. The links are there. Contact your member of parliament, which I've done with a number of conservative MPs. And to this point, and to me, it's such low hanging fruit. I mean, you can go after Omar Al Gabra on this, because it makes absolutely no sense to anybody that's concerned with safety in the air, and that's Transport Canada's mandate, and they have abdicated that for I would say 3+ years at least now. And so there's one more point I can make here, but I know I've been talking in a monologue, so I'll hand it back over to you here.
No, you can talk all that you want, and go ahead with your one more point. This is beautiful, and I just want to say thank you, because I didn't really do justice in introducing you. You are a retired military veteran, and until the mandates, you were once a commercial pilot. But you chose to leave in order to co-found Free to Fly. And I guess you had a big decision to make at that point. And so you know what you're speaking of. You know, the history of the airlines and being a pilot in Canada. And so I appreciate, and everybody should be, visiting Free to Fly to see what's happening to protect us. And you're part of that. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, just to make sure that's completely accurate, when the Transport Canada interim order was rescinded or suspended, let me choose my words carefully again, suspended last summer, the bulk of us are now back to work. So I was back to flying as of October. I want to be very careful to point out there's many who are not, and man, it's hard to follow Stephen Michael, and that's just an example of some other pilots and that within this country who have not got their jobs back. So my hat's off to them, absolutely. But anyway, just to wrap up this point about the telemedicals. So March 1st of this year, Transport Canada extended that into 2025. So we're back in a situation where pilots in this country can now go 36 months. So they can skip 2 years in a row. And we're talking guys that are 55, 60 years old without getting an EKG. March 14th, ironically, almost concurrently, the Transportation Safety Board, which is an independent organization, finished up a report on a tragic crash back in 2021 of an aircraft in Alberta. Now, the pilot of that aircraft was an air transport pilot. He was a pilot with an airline. And unfortunately, he had simply attested his medical status in the winter of 2021 because that's what Transport Canada allowed. And the government is pretty careful with poking each other, but the TSB did, as part of their investigation, recommend routine review and improvement to the Civil Aviation Medical Examiner's guidelines. And the first piece of which, and I'll just close with this, this is the handbook for the Transport Canada doctors who, like I said, we've got guys who don't have to see them now for almost 3 years. It literally says to these doctors, you may be the only physician in the normal course of events who has talked to the pilot and had a hands-on opportunity to form an impression. And yet Mr. Alghabra and Transport Canada are fine with us not doing medicals for 36 months. And apparently so are the airlines in this country. So if your viewers want to get involved, which I think people really have a visceral desire to do, I would encourage you to contact the airlines, contact Mr. Alghabra, contact your MP and say, what on earth are we doing? We're the only nation. I've talked to Josh in the States. I've talked to our European colleagues. We're the only nation I know of globally that is beclowning themselves in aviation and allowing this.
Really? So Canada is the only one?
Allowing these telemedicals? Yeah, I mean, there may be an obscure nation, but I've checked in. We've got the Global Aviation Advocacy Coalition. So that's the US, Australia, a number of European countries. I asked them and they said, no, they don't know of anybody who's allowing telemedicals. They still have to do in person. And it makes sense. I mean, that's what we did for decades, right? And now all of a sudden we're allowing this. It's just hard to wrap our heads around. Because the quandary here is, what can we do about crew incapacitation? Well, the only thing we can really do at this point, post-mandate, and we as Free to Fly were very vocal. We provided the airlines all of this information about why it was a bad idea. We stepped out of our job thinking we were being terminated. The only thing that we can really do as a backstop from a medical standpoint is screen pilots properly. And yet, we're not going to bother doing that. We're going to let guys sit at home. And I just had my in-person medical actually just this past Monday. And so I kind of went toe to toe with the doctor and I said, what are we doing? And he kind of stammered a bit and said, well, it's convenient for guys that live a fair ways away that are healthy. And I said, well, how do you know he's healthy? And there wasn't really an answer, because this is the issue. The same with this tragic accident in Alberta. The gentleman felt he was healthy. How do you really know unless you're screening properly? So we've got to, at the bare minimum, get back to in-person medicals, but we should really be doing far more robust heart screening, I would say, for pilots in this country. And I know others like Steve Kirsch and our colleagues at the U.S. Freedom Flyers are advocating for much of the same.
I really appreciate that, because we're having some factors be exposed. We're seeing many young doctors. Dr. William Mackis is exposing the number of young kids that have died, the number of doctors that have died. We have the firemen that were just on stating that they began to see these injuries. I personally have people close to me that I know had very serious reactions and deaths actually in a couple of elderly people. And I hear the stories all the time, and it just seems that we should be more careful. So we'll not say anything about that we don't know. We're just wondering if the science should be followed when globally deaths are up higher than the pandemic year of 2020. Deaths are much higher, and people are reporting on it, and there seems to be no clear understanding of why. All over the world, there's more deaths. The excess deaths are staggering. It seems that in something like aviation. That would be one field where extra precaution would be taken, not pulling back on caring for the pilots who need to be in tip-top shape. It's very shocking, and I appreciate that you're bringing this to light. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the platform. Like I said, we try to focus on what we can do, and of course, we're tracking these issues as well. We're trying to dig into the data as well. I've spent hours on the phone with airline pilots in my role. They feel comfortable talking to me about the issues that they're dealing with post jab. Unfortunately, they took the jab to save their job, and they're not super keen to put their hand up and lose their medical to speak to the issues after the fact. So it's definitely an issue that's out there. But really, until we see more and more people, like Steve and Michael, that are willing to speak up publicly, that's courage begets courage, right? And we've got to get more people that are willing to do so.
I just want to let you know, as I let you go, that Greg, you make me feel safe that you're flying, that you've had a physical, that you are taking care of yourself, and you're making sure that you are doing due diligence to do that. That makes me feel great, and I would gladly fly on any airplane that you are flying. And that's not how I feel these days in other airplanes. So thank you.
Hey, well, thanks. Hey, and can I close with a quick thought here as well?
Yes, sir.
And it's ironic because both Steve and Michael spoke similarly, and I was praying a little bit before I got on here, and I had the exact same thought, and I've tried to be more public about this. And a passage from 2 Chronicles 16:19 came to be recently, and as we see more and more of our country delve sometimes into hopelessness, and even amongst the like-minded, this verse stands out to me, and it's, "For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him." And as we see some of this hopelessness, in the words of the old hymn, I can't help but think our hope needs to be built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. So I appreciated what they said, and I thought it was kind of cool because the same thought came to me before I logged on here. So thanks for all you're doing.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Greg, thank you so much. You make me feel great about our country and great about flying on any plane that you're piloting. Thank you. And God bless.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Wow. Our hope is built on nothing less. That is so amazing. I feel a little bit emotional today with these guys that are standing up for us, because our safety now is in the hands of a lot of people who don't make me feel safe. I don't feel safe when due diligence is not being done, when we have excess deaths worldwide, are alarming. And some people in high places don't even know that. That's disturbing. Really, really bothers me. We have some news. Should we go through video? Is there any lineup that you want to follow? I was thinking of going down the list. Well, how about we do Rand Paul confronting Moderna CEO about the risk of myocarditis? You got that one? This is, I love Rand Paul. He is my hero. And I pray for someone a lot like him in Canada. Take a look.
Interest or a higher incidence of myocarditis among adolescent males 16 to 24 after taking your vaccine?
So thank you for the question, Senator. First, let me say we care deeply about safety, and we're working closely with the CDC and the FDA to
Pretty much a yes or no. Is there a higher incidence of myocarditis among boys 16 to 24 after they take your vaccine?
The data I've seen from the CDC actually shown that there's less myocarditis for people who get the vaccine versus who get COVID infection.
You're saying that for ages 16 to 24 among males who take the COVID vaccine, their risk of myocarditis is less than people who get the disease.
That is my understanding,
That
Senator.
is not true, and I'd like to enter into the record 6 peer-reviewed papers from the Journal of Vaccine, the Annals of Medicine, that say the complete opposite of what you say. I also spoke with your president just last week, and he readily acknowledged in private that, yes, there is an increased risk of myocarditis. The fact that you can't say it in public is quite disturbing.
Quite disturbing. Isn't this all quite disturbing? The facts are there. We have Dr. Makis reporting on well over 100 kids that have died. We've got the doctors that have died. We all know people that have died. And this bozo head, unbelievable. How does he even have a job? How is Moderna not asking him to vacate his office? Well, maybe because he's lying for them. Maybe because he's doing what he's supposed to do. Big cover up. Unbelievable. Do people not care? I mean, it's just, oh my goodness. So Tucker Carlson, the Democrats are still trying to eliminate the threat that Trump poses. They will do everything they can to stop him from running for a second term as president, even as oh, is that from yesterday's? Okay, I don't think that's the one from today. Sorry. Oh, that was good yesterday, though. Never mind. Okay, how about this one? U.S. Vice President Kamala wrote a letter to TikToker Dylan Mulvaney. Now, if any of you have seen this TikToker, it's disturbing. It's a young man who wants to be a girl for whatever reason, and is just such an unattractive girl. I mean, if he was really trying, it's just very sad and disturbing. And so Kamala is congratulating him for documenting 365 days of himself living like a woman. This is a mockery of women and a crime against impressionable kids. It's absolutely disturbing. Where are the women's libbers that once fought so hard for women to be appreciated, for women to be set apart, for women to have the same opportunities as men, not for men to now be highlighted as women when it's a joke. It's a joke. He's got body parts. He is not a girl, and he can never be a girl. And Kamala, the woke Kamala, and let me tell you something about all these people, just like Biden, they were all totally would have thought if you got them in a quiet room 5 years ago, they would think it was nuts. But because there's now this propaganda, this agenda paid for by big money, funded by Soros you know who funded the transgender movement across the world in schools? Soros. I've shown the evidence of that before on this show, and I don't have time to keep reiterating, but it appears that people with a lot of money want to cause a lot of confusion. Do you really think that Soros believes any of this? That old dude, that old ugly man, and I'm talking about his soul, not his outside. His soul is so dark, and he's about to face his judgment. Any day now would be good. And he has spent his money and energy on trying to topple the world, depopulate the world, to bring confusion and fund a transgender agenda. Why is that important? The art of war, to cause distraction, to get this group fighting this group so that it all looks like there's a big problem here. And while that's going on, oh, well, hey, you can be putting in all of these things with Agenda 2030. Let's look at some of those things, JT, that are planned for our future. I think you have that list of how they want to stop. We were just talking to a pilot. Well, oh, Lord knows I'm probably not going to be able to see that. Oh, okay, you're going to zoom in? Okay, so this is how big it is, so take a look. So these are road vehicles, rail, flying. Okay, let's start with road vehicles. Development of diesel engines. Any ends? Oh, engines. Any new vehicle, I don't understand that lingo. Okay, any new vehicle introduced from now on must be compatible with absolute zero. All new vehicles, electric, average size of cars needs to be reduced basically to 1,000 kilograms. Rail, growth in domestic and, I'm just going to make this a bit larger, an intentional rail. Read the airport one. All right, is that flying? All airports except Heathrow, Glasgow, and Belfast close with transfers by rail from them. So this is in the UK, and this is their plan. Look all here, all remaining airports closed by 2030. That's the plan. Let's read shipping. There are currently no freight ships operating without emissions, so shipping must contract. All shipping declines to zero. That's the plan. These people are crazy. Food, let's do food. Okay. So national consumption of beef and lamb drops by 50%, along with reduction in frozen, ready meals and air freighted food imports. I'm sorry I'm reading, I have to really put this large to be able to see it. But look at this, is this by 2030, this side? Beef and lamb are phased out. That is terrible. The lamb can go. I'm not a big lamb person, but although it's really good in curry, that is the one place I love having lamb. But beef, they want to take away that you can't have a steak in the UK by 2030, along with all imports not transported by train, fertilizer use greatly reduced. So these are their sustainable development goals. These are the UN Agenda 2030 stuff that's going on that is not good. It's not good there. It's not good in our land. And this is, shocking that Pierre Poilievre, on the video we've shown where Mark Friesen asks him what he thinks about the SDGs. The SDGs are what formulates what our countries will do in all of these matters. And although Mr. Poilievre had voted on them, he said he didn't know what they were. We've shown that video, and we should show it again. I don't understand. I'm just saying, I want to support a great leader. I just don't want to support a Trudeau light. I want to support a great leader. If that is Pierre Poilievre, I need him to understand what's going on with SDGs. I need him to protect us from the climate nonsense, which he seems down with. I need him to protect us from the warmongering going on by the Ukraine. But Pierre Poilievre is all behind that effort. This is alarming. It really is. Speaker Kevin McCarthy, with a little bit of U.S. news here, is bringing up some very important and tough questions now. And Nancy Pelosi, she's officially been dethroned. And I kind of like this guy. Take a look.
I know they fought to cover this up for a long time, and they had Democrats in the majority that never asked any question. Didn't ask any questions about Afghanistan when 13 Gold Star families, 13 were killed. They never had one hearing on it. Millions of people across this world got killed from COVID. They never had one hearing on the origins of where COVID began. This has all changed since we took a majority. So now they're upset they got $1 million from the Chinese on the first subpoena of the bank statements we got back, and they know there's going to be 11 more. I wonder how mad they'll get.
Well, he is certainly asking the right questions, and I like how tough he is. We need leaders and politicians to begin holding the government accountable, not going along with all of it, not cowering, not being forced to apologize for speaking the truth. What a mess. What a mess. Every political party right now in power is not courageous. Not at all. And they can't even, talk to you about what a woman is. Really? Do you think that they know what a woman is? Can they answer that in this politically incorrect environment where we want to actually know if somebody's following the science and not an agenda? I don't know. So we can, there is, who coined the term gender identity? This is kind of interesting. So John Money, who coined the term gender identity, sexually abused children and said, if I were to see a boy aged 10 or 11 who's intensely erotically attracted toward a man, if the relationship is mutual, I would not call it pathological. So this sick son of a gun who belongs in prison, I guess he's dead, I don't know, is the idiot who coined this phrase, gender identity, and we're all just following along with it. And then next, so Women's Voices says Volkmar Sigush, who coined cisgender, wrote, there is nothing wrong with pedophilia in the sense of the word. That is, against liking, even loving children, the sensuality that unfolds between a child and an adult. That's Volkmar, who coined cisgender, that they all want to do. The pedophiles are running the asylum. The pedophiles are out full force, in broad daylight, openly saying this stuff, and guess who's promoting them? The LGBTQ. The ones who want to go by, some of them, the ones who want to go by cisgender and all of this. I've had my last day of putting up quietly with all of this. I am not tolerant. I am not tolerant of pedophiles. I'm not tolerant of harming children. I'm not tolerant of transitioning minors. I'm not tolerant of any of it. And by the way, you're not tolerant of me. So back off. All right. Author Roy Beck explains how mass immigration doesn't solve any problems. This is what we're seeing in the United States of America. And by the way, we've got a problem in Canada because those that are coming up through the Mexican border, up through the United States, are also making their way into Canada. So, you know, this is a little bit of an explanation on how it can hurt everyone. Take a look.
5.6 billion people in the world who live in countries with average incomes below that of Mexico. That's 5,600 gumballs. And so what is it that the elites are telling us? They're telling us that when we take this 1 million immigrants, that we somehow or another are tackling world poverty. And we have to do it regardless of the effect on our unemployed, the working poor, the most vulnerable members of our society, regardless of the effect on our natural resources. Even if we went by the most radical proposals in Washington, which are to actually double our immigration to 2 million a year, which would totally overwhelm our physical, natural, and social infrastructures, we couldn't make a noticeable difference. And we may be really hurting the impoverished people of the world because the million that we do take are among the most energetic, often the better educated, certainly the most dissatisfied people that if they did not immigrate would be the agents for change to improve the lot of all the people in these countries. The true heroes in the global humanitarian field are the people in these countries who have the wherewithal to immigrate to another country, but instead stay in their countries to apply their skills to help their fellow countrymen. Unfortunately, our immigration system tends to entice these very type of people to abandon their countrymen. The impossibility of making even a dent is actually worse than it looks here. Because last year, when we took 1 million immigrants, these countries added, births over deaths, 80 million more people into the impoverished population. And this year, Congress is bringing in 1 million legal immigrants. And this year, according to the United Nations, these countries are expected to add another 80 million people. And next year, you can be quite sure that Congress, unless stopped by the American voters, we'll bring in another million immigrants. And these countries, unfortunately, will be adding another 80 million people into these impoverished nations. We could take 5 million a year, but we'd never get ahead of what's happening in these countries, not in this century. Don't you see? Immigration can never be an effective or significant way to deal with the suffering people of the world. They have to be helped where they live. 99.9% of them will never be able to immigrate to a rich country. There's no hope for that. They have to bloom where they're planted. The only place that 99.9% of these people can be helped is where they live. Let's help them there.
So I want to, isn't that shocking? Maxime Bernier has been speaking on the mass immigration. And I want to show you something here if you've got that thing there. So Maxime Bernier, I think this was yesterday that he wrote this. Mass immigration has nothing to do with freedom. It is social engineering. It's a policy imposed by globalist elites to forcibly change our culture and society, as opposed to how it would organically and gradually adapt and evolve with sustainable immigration. It destroys social cohesion and lowers trust, which justifies more government intervention and makes it easier for globalist elites to control us. And he had one more that was on mass immigration right here. Mass is the operative word. I think, yeah. He posted this as someone, immigration has always been welcomed, but when it reaches levels where it impacts communities' ability to provide infrastructure, it breaks society down, it stresses the balance of energies, and assimilation is impaired. It's a globalist destabilizer. And it's really fascinating to me that Maxime Bernier has been willing to speak on these issues. Here's one more here, if we've got it. Many don't seem to understand, and I think that this was posted today, or pretend they don't understand the difference between mass immigration, which has a negative impact. If immigration and sustainable, reasonable immigration, which can be positive. If immigration is always positive, as they claim, then why stop at 500,000 immigrants per year? Why not 1 million, 5 million? Why not let in anyone who wants to move to Canada without limits? Why wouldn't you do it if it's so good? Because it's not always good. And we have seen that when people come to Canada, I know when it all started that we were sort of going to be, embracing people to come here and keep their cultures. That's what's happened. And even the difficulties between different people groups have still had their infighting going on here in Canada. Wouldn't it be nice if when you get to Canada, you're Canadian and embrace the Canadian way? I just think that would be good. So Pacific, I do want to do one more thing though about, one of the things I appreciate about Maxime is his ability to speak on the gender issue. And as of today, I didn't even know he had posted this, but Maxime Bernier is very able to tell you who and what a woman is. And so he actually, if you can see this video, this is where, this was back yesterday, this was back December 2nd, 2021. Yesterday, the Conservative caucus called for a unanimous consent motion in order to pass Bill C-4, the bill to ban conversion therapy. The motion received unanimous consent and is therefore sent to the Senate to proceed through legislative process. What you just saw there, all those people that were standing, that's the Conservative Party of Canada standing unanimously for Bill C-4 to pass the ban on conversion therapy. What is that? That's just a fancy way of saying if there's a boy and he thinks he's a girl, that you are not allowed to tell him the truth, that he's a boy. You're not allowed to say that. Bill C-4, with the conservatives, they stood in unanimous applause against science, against, critical thinking on a matter. And they stood there they are, all clapping. So important that from a few months ago about Bill C6 banning conversion therapy, which is in fact, I think it is actually C6, banning conversion therapy, which in fact promotes kids transitioning and criminalizes those who want to help them deal with gender dysphoria instead of mutilating their body. Poilievre and his conservatives, his fake conservatives, voted for that bill. That's Maxime Bernier, a former CPC person, but who has come out and is now standing for what is right. Can I just say, I can't tell you how to vote. I know that you're all going to vote for the CPC because, or the CBC. Don't vote for the CBC. That's even worse than voting any other way. But you're all afraid of Trudeau being kept in power. So you're choosing to vote. This is the truth. The Liberals vote for conversion therapy ban. The CPC votes for a conversion therapy ban. If you are a God-fearing Canadian who knows the truth that this is utter nonsense, please tell me how you can vote for this party. Please tell me. I know a lot of you don't want me talking against the CPC. Just tell me, how do we get God's favor in this country if we are not going to vote our principles, but we keep voting for the lesser of two evils? And I don't know that it's lesser. What? I don't know. Maybe they'll fight digital ID a little bit longer. Is that the positive? Okay. I'm sure God's pleased with that. All right. Was that the last that he said about that? Yeah. Okay. So Pacific Western Bank and PacWest Bancorp shares have dropped in value more than 10% today. So what is going on with all of that? What does it mean, JT? PacWest could be going under. Mm-hmm. So a regional bank looks like they're having trouble as well. So we see this ongoing issue that's happening, since we saw what happened with SVB, and then the other one, Prestigious Signature. I knew it was something special. Yeah, very close. And so we're seeing all of this happen. And that's why we're very supportive right now of turning any cash you have laying around, little or much, into silver and gold. So I did a text to the silver guy that we use at Sun City Silver and Gold. And I said, am I missing anything? Like, isn't this the easiest decision in the world? Am I missing something? Like, I really believe in it. That's why I'm bringing it to you so often, is because if you've got $10,000 in the bank right now, you can buy $10,000 worth of silver. On the day that the Canadian dollar might be devalued because it's not worth the money, the paper that it's printed on, and on the day where something goes horribly wrong, and we can't all see that, and your money, $10,000 in the bank, is now worthless. If you had bought $10,000 worth of silver, it's still worth that, and probably a lot more. I'm going to sneeze. It just goes away. He was ready. Okay. Oh, I hate that. I mean, it was right there. My nose even smarted. But if you've purchased silver, your $10,000 worth of silver is rock solid. Why? Because it's coins. It's hard. You have it. You either have it, buried in your backyard, or you've got it hidden away, or you've got it in a safe place but it's yours. And on the day that you need it, gold and silver can be turned in at any money changer worldwide. Or what? Yeah. If it all collapses, you could use it. I heard for the first time at an event that I was at on Monday night, I heard for the very first time, a guy said, "You can buy both my books for 1 silver coin. I'll take it." That was cool. I'm like, wow, everybody clapped. I just want to thank Kenzie67. Is a $5 donation today on YouTube or on Rumble? Nice. Can people like just donate on Rumble? I don't even know what platforms can do that. That's really neat. Thank you, Kenzie. That's really nice. Thank you. We're getting close to the end. New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg's effort to change Trump has been delayed. So to charge Trump. So it looks like Trump's safe for yet another day. Maybe they're going to try to charge him tomorrow. But Tucker Carlson did quite an incredible interview with a gentleman that basically calls their star witness, this dorky guy. Basically, he's a liar. He does not have any credibility at all. And this is who the DA is relying on to bring these charges against Trump. And everybody's like, this guy is a complete fool. And they have the documentation of him basically saying something completely opposite to what he's saying right now. In the past, he was in some sort of deposition and he's saying, I have nothing on Trump. I have nothing on Trump. Now, in order to get out of trouble, in order to get a get out of jail free card, so to speak, to get something on his side, all of a sudden, oh yes, now I have the goods on Trump. Well, he doesn't actually. So is that it? All right, Laura-Lynn, Tyler Thompson, thank you for watching our show today. My website is lauralynn.tv, and I appreciate any and all of your wonderful donations if you're able to support the work that we do. And donations are a little bit down right now, and I'm wondering if that's because you're struggling financially or you don't like what I'm saying. I don't know, except that you're all watching in increasing numbers. We are seeing our daily average views double. So I'm really encouraged by that. But if you are able to help us, we do appreciate it. We do know that our life and times are in the hands of God, so we trust Him, and we know He's with us because, you know, JT and I had to really consider the cost when we decided let's just go full bore doing this kind of programming. We didn't know if we could make it at all, or if we would be, you know, like be homeless under a bridge because we couldn't get jobs anywhere. Everybody, even Christian organizations, won't hire me because of how I speak. And I like that. I don't want to be hired by some of those Christian organizations because we are in an epic hour where we have got to shout the truth from the rooftops. And if we do not, it can only get worse. We are to expose the evil works of darkness. We're to tell the truth unashamedly, without apology. We're to speak what is right. Because if my people will humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways and repent, then God will see us and He will forgive us and He will heal our land. How does any of that happen if we do not speak the truth? So I find myself in this most beautiful position, probably making less money than I made in the past with a very cushy TV job, yet able to speak the truth where only God and once in a while my husband can tell me to be silent. And I like it because I can follow my conscience and I can tell you my gut, and we can have discussion about it. Thank you for your emails where you say, you know, I want to know about this or that, or, you know, I didn't really agree with you on this. What do you think about this? And we can have a discussion back and forth. I'm very grateful that 99% of my letters are in complete agreement with most of what I say. If you're not in agreement, let's have a conversation about it. So in the middle of the night, I was not sleeping, so I listened to pretty much the entire book of Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, got over here to Amos, and there is a part in Amos 5 where it says it's a lament and a call to repentance, and it's all about what the Lord was saying to Israel, because he had been with them and they had continued to reject him and reject him and reject him. And even though God had set aside the people, the Jews, as his chosen people, and in the Old Testament, like, this is all it's about. God was not with any of the other peoples of the world. They served pagan gods. They sacrificed children to pagan gods made of wood or stone or gold. But God was the one true God, with no graven image ever to be made of him. He wanted the people to serve him, and they didn't. And so God spoke to them, and he basically began saying, "Seek me and live." This is what the Lord says to you. As your town marches out, seek me and live. Do not seek Bethel. Do not go to Gilgal. Do not journey to Beersheba, but seek me. Seek the Lord and live, or he will sweep through your tribes like a fire, and they shall be devoured, and you will have no one to quench it. This is why I think it's important. Seek me and live. I want my kids to see that I thought that was important one day. Seek the Lord and live. I'm asking you, is this all about the correct political party that gets out the worst guy? I barely care about politics. How are we going to fix this with anything that is in Parliament right now? Even the people that are people of conviction, they're silenced right now, forced to apologize, told to sit quietly, mind your manners, look good, follow the party line. Is that what God wants us to do? No. God came before the people of Israel and he said, "Seek me and live." If you do not seek me, you will basically be restored, destroyed, and reduced to nothing. I think God has a good plan for Canada. There have been some great prophetic words lately about God redeeming us. I have to tell you, I'm not certain that it's yet, because I don't think we're pleasing him yet. I think that we're voting out of fear. I think that we don't give God his place in our land. I don't think we're standing up for the children enough. I think our schools are places where the most vile, pedophile nonsense is being peddled, and we're silent. The majority of Canadians are quiet as babies are murdered in the womb. I think it's time that we have to do what God wants us to do. Seek God so that we might live. I'll see you tomorrow.
You know, it's not easy to deliver the truth of what our sick world is doing, but for some of us, we feel that we have no choice. Because if we are silent about these abominable things, then we are letting evil go unchecked, and we cannot do that. For those of you wonderful people who are writing me and are sharing your encouragement, I am deeply grateful. Thank you for all the letters that you've been sending. Thank you for the donations and the support. I found out that in order to speak the truth, you have to become very, very strong. If you would go to my website at www.laura-lynn.tv, you'll find all of the ways that you can contact me. Remember, my friends, all is well. All is well. Thanks for joining me.